The story of ancient Egypt is closer to our time than it may first appear. When we look at the enormous achievements of this civilization, we must ask how such greatness came to be and what ultimately caused it to fade. The success of the Egyptian world rested on its unique ability to adapt to the natural environment of the Nile Valley. The Nile flooded with remarkable predictability year after year, and through the careful management of irrigation channels, farmers could cultivate fertile lands that yielded a surplus of crops. That agricultural surplus fed large populations and supported the growth of cities' culture and social order. It also gave space for the development of new technologies and artistic achievements that would inspire the world for centuries. At the heart of this success was the ability to exploit the valley and the deserts that surrounded it. Out of this environment emerged one of the earliest independent writing systems. Hieroglyphs were not simply words on stone but instruments of administration, religion, and memory. Egypt also became skilled at organizing massive building projects, whether pyramids rising in the desert, temples dedicated to gods, or irrigation networks linking entire communities. These projects required discipline and structure, and at the center of that structure was the pharaoh. The king of Egypt was not simply a ruler but the living embodiment of divine order. Through a highly organized bureaucracy controlled by the pharaoh, a vast elite of priests and administrators managed the lives of millions. Religion was inseparable from politics and daily existence. The Egyptian gods shaped their calendar, their laws, and their ambitions. Through religion, Egyptians justified their monuments and their wars. They developed mathematics to calculate land and design structures. They mastered irrigation to tame the floods of the Nile. They invented medical practices that astonished their neighbors and which remain admired to this day. Their ability to cut, polish, and move huge blocks of stone gave us pyramids, obelisks, and temples that still rise above the desert after thousands of years. The Egyptians were also a people of diplomacy and military might. They fought to defend their lands and extend their borders. One of the most fascinating episodes of their history was the treaty signed between Egypt and the Hittite Empire, the earliest known peace treaty in human history. This agreement shows that Egypt was both a land of warriors and a land of negotiators capable of finding balance even with formidable enemies. But when we gaze at their ruins and statues, when we reflect on their medical knowledge and their grand architecture, we inevitably ask what happened to them. What caused this seemingly eternal civilization to decline? The seeds of collapse were planted even in moments of apparent glory. Under the reign of Ramesses the Second in the 19th dynasty, Egypt seemed unstoppable. Ramesses fought the Hittites at the famous Battle of Kadesh and recorded his triumphs on temple walls. Yet beneath this image of power, weaknesses were beginning to appear. Throughout its long history, Egypt was invaded or controlled by many foreign powers. The Hyksos, Libyans, Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, and others each left their mark. The first major sign of decline was the weakening of Egypt's military position. While other rising empires learned to forge iron weapons, Egypt remained reliant on bronze. The Hittites and later peoples had access to stronger metals, which gave them an edge on the battlefield. Egypt's limited access to natural resources meant that over time it became vulnerable to better armed rivals. Military technology alone did not bring Egypt down, but it contributed to the imbalance of power. Internal problems were even more destructive. Political conflict fractured the kingdom into rival regions. Civil wars between northern and southern Egypt drained the state and allowed foreign powers to intervene. As rival claimants fought for power, the authority of the pharaoh weakened. Religion, which had once been a unifying force, became entangled with wealth and corruption. Priests accumulated vast lands and resources, creating resentment among ordinary people who felt excluded from prosperity. Economic inequality grew sharper. The nobility and religious elites lived in luxury, while peasants struggled to survive. The administration faltered and tax burdens increased. To fund costly wars, rulers drained the treasury. Corruption spread through government. Dependence on the Nile created additional risk. When the river's floods were irregular, crops failed and famine followed. Droughts left thousands starving. Disease spread. At such times, the promises of the pharaoh and the priests rang hollow and discontent grew. By the 7th century before the Common Era, Egypt faced a powerful external enemy. The Assyrians invaded, seizing Memphis, looting temples, and crushing Egyptian resistance. Though Egypt briefly regained independence under the 26th dynasty, its strength was never fully restored. The climate too played its part. Low floods of the Nile caused crop failures and starvation. Scholars believe that irregular flooding in the later centuries made Egypt more fragile, just as new threats were emerging from abroad. In 525 before the Common Era, the Persian Empire struck. Pharaoh Psamtik III was defeated at the Battle of Pelusium, and the Persians incorporated Egypt into their empire. Though Persians adopted the title of pharaoh, they ruled from afar through governors and treated Egypt as a province. Egypt became a piece of a larger empire rather than the heart of its own. When Alexander the Great swept through the Persian Empire, Egypt welcomed him as a liberator. The Macedonian conqueror founded Alexandria, which soon became one of the greatest centers of learning and trade in the world. After Alexander's death, his general Ptolemy established the Ptolemaic kingdom, blending Greek and Egyptian traditions. For centuries, Alexandria shone with culture and knowledge. Yet even this kingdom was fragile. Civil strife, foreign threats, and the ambitions of Rome drew Egypt into new conflicts. Eventually, Rome annexed Egypt, transforming it into a vital province of its vast empire. Christianity spread, and with it the Greek alphabet. Old religious practices, like mummification, faded. Hieroglyphs disappeared. The cultural pillars of ancient Egypt crumbled under the weight of new traditions. This transformation marked the true end of the old Egyptian civilization. Yet Egypt remained a land of strategic value. In the early 7th century of the Common Era, the Persians again seized the Nile, but were soon driven out by the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius. Only a few years later, Muslim armies arrived, and by 641 Egypt was incorporated into the rapidly expanding caliphate. The rule of the pharaohs and even the influence of Rome had ended. A new era shaped by Islam and Arabic culture began. Looking back across 3 millennia, we see a civilization that rose through adaptation to its river environment, that built wonders unmatched in human history, that pioneered writing, mathematics, medicine, and architecture. But we also see a civilization vulnerable to inequality, corruption, resource limits, and the ambitions of stronger neighbors. The fall of Egypt was not sudden, but a long process in which external invasions and internal weaknesses combined to erode its independence. Even in its decline, Egypt left legacies that endure.
The pyramids still rise from the desert sands.
Hieroglyphs still whisper their stories on temple walls.
The memory of the Pharaohs still fascinate.
Ancient Egypt may have fallen, but it never truly vanished. It became part of the cultural fabric of the Mediterranean and the Near East, influencing Greeks, Romans, Persians, and Arabs. Its knowledge and myths continued to inspire long after its last pharaoh had passed into history. The collapse of Egypt teaches us that no civilization, no matter how mighty, is immune to decline. It shows us the importance of resources, technology, unity, and fairness. It warns us about corruption, inequality, and environmental vulnerability. Yet it also leaves us with marvels that stand as testaments to human imagination and resilience. To walk among the ruins of Luxor or gaze at the Great Pyramid of Giza is to stand in the presence of an ancient dream. A dream that shaped the course of history.